Ladies and gentlemen, what if one day Vladimir Putin, Russia's most powerful leader, suddenly vanished from the Kremlin? What would really be happening? Is he hiding in a secret location, trying to evade an assassination plot? Or has he been removed from power by some shadow faction? At a time when the Russia-Ukraine war is escalating, NATO is on high alert, and President Donald Trump has unexpectedly approved a strong financial response. Putin's disappearance has unleashed an unprecedented wave of speculation and conspiracy theories. Is Russia still truly being run by Putin? Or are we only seeing elaborately staged images from fake offices designed to conceal a dark truth? And could this be a sign of the Russian Empire's impending collapse? Welcome to Military 247. Today, we'll analyze these strange signs together, uncovering a story unlike any other in modern history. Putin's disappearance from the Kremlin and who the world is really dealing with now. For decades, Putin's image has been synonymous with the long table in the Kremlin, the site of all-night meetings with Russian generals and powerful declarations on national television. Recently, however, Western intelligence and the American media have simultaneously made a shocking accusation. Putin is no longer physically present at the Kremlin. Instead, he only appears in meticulously staged images from 3 fake offices, all identical down to the last detail. From the wooden desk and leather chair to the double-headed eagle pen holder, everything has been perfectly replicated. This has fueled suspicion that Putin is living in the shadows, perhaps somewhere in the Ural Mountains or a deep underground bunker in Siberia, places believed to be absolutely safe from long-range missile attacks. The question is, if he has to hide like this, how much real power does Putin actually have left? Military analysts suggest that the Kremlin's flaunting of massive motorcades or launching decoy presidential jets isn't just standard security. It reflects panic at the highest levels. Never before in history has a Russian leader needed to use 3 fake offices to appear on television. Even during the most tense periods of the Cold War, Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev all worked directly from the Kremlin. So why has Putin vanished? One theory suggests he's suffering from a serious illness. Rumors of cancer and secret surgeries have leaked multiple times over the past few years. If this is true, his disappearance isn't for security reasons, but simply because he's no longer healthy enough to appear in public. However, there's another, much more dramatic theory. Putin has been sidelined by his own inner circle, a group of generals, security officials, and oligarchs, fearing he could lead the country to the brink of collapse, may have forced him to step back and remain silent in the shadows. In this scenario, the fake offices are just political theater to deceive the world, while real power now lies in the hands of others. Looking at the situation on the Ukrainian battlefield, this theory seems increasingly plausible. Russia has suffered heavy losses, with advanced weapon systems like the S-400, T-90M, and Su-35 being continuously destroyed by Ukraine, aided by American technology. Meanwhile, the United States is not only supplying Patriot missile defense systems, but also expanding its long-range arsenal, even deploying F-16 fighter jets and strategic drones to its allies. Faced with such immense pressure, Putin should be appearing to reassure the Russian people, yet he has disappeared. Could there be a truth the Kremlin cannot publicly admit? Many experts believe that a leader so paranoid he has to construct an entire system of fake stages to hide himself is a sign of deep internal instability. Imagine if one day Putin is truly gone, but the Kremlin continues to broadcast his image on TV. How would the world react? Would NATO still consider Russia a legitimate state? Would the Russian people still trust his leadership? And more importantly, how would the United States exploit this situation? We have to remember Donald Trump has repeatedly emphasized that America possesses the world's most advanced military technology, from the F-35 stealth fighter and B-2 bomber to the Aegis missile defense system on its warships. With just one move from Trump, all of NATO would instantly shift to combat readiness. So if Putin disappears, it would be a golden opportunity for the U.S. and its allies to pressure Russia and make it pay. The military world sees this differently. Disappearing doesn't mean Putin's role is over. Sometimes, hiding is a strategy to create a major surprise. The problem is, right now, all signs point to Russia being on the defensive. While Europe is speeding up the delivery of 2 million artillery shells to Ukraine, Russia is forced to draw from its Soviet-era stockpiles and even buy ammunition from North Korea. This shows a clear disparity between the superior defense industry of the West, led by the US, and a depleted Russia. So why would Putin choose to disappear instead of facing the crisis? Is it possible he simply has no other choice? Unable to appear to defend his own credibility, Putin may have accepted the Kremlin's use of fake images, hoping to maintain temporary stability. But the questions remain. Can the Russian people trust a leader who only exists on a screen? And can the world negotiate with a phantom of power in this complex strategic landscape? This is precisely where the US and NATO are seizing their advantage. Donald Trump doesn't need long speeches. With just 3 words, "Here we go," he has made the entire world question if this is the signal for an all-out counteroffensive against Russia. When Putin is gone and the Kremlin is nothing but fake offices, the most important question is, who really has their finger on the nuclear button? Ladies and gentlemen, in military history, moments when a supreme leader disappears are often a prelude to regime change. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein used body doubles to deceive the world. In Nazi Germany, Hitler hid in a bunker as the war neared its end. Is Russia now repeating this tragic history? As Donald Trump gives NATO the green light to prepare for action, as Europe pumps more weapons into Ukraine, and as the Kremlin becomes a hollow stage, we must ask, Putin has vanished, but what phantom is now controlling Russia? In the history of modern warfare, many leaders have been haunted by assassination plots. However, no case is quite like Vladimir Putin's, who is believed to have constructed an entire system of fake offices, decoy motorcades, and ghost planes to conceal his true location. Why is he so terrified? The answer may lie in the profound shifts in the Russia-Ukraine war and within Russian politics itself. Putin has long been known for his personal security paranoia. For over 2 decades in power, he has rarely moved without a massive security detail. His Ilyushin Il-96 presidential planes are often escorted by a squadron of Su-27 or Su-35 fighter jets. His motorcades can stretch for dozens of vehicles, using decoy routes and last-minute changes to avoid being tracked. But after 2022, this obsession intensified dramatically. Western sources claim Putin no longer trusts even his closest associates. The fear of being assassinated from within by disgruntled generals or oligarchs who have lost fortunes has forced him into a constant state of suspicion and anxiety. This paranoia is not baseless. Russian history is filled with bloody purges. Stalin eliminated countless generals on suspicion of treason. Andropov, a former KGB head, always stressed that ultimate power in Russia is never truly secure. For Putin, that fear is magnified because he is waging a costly war, is isolated by the world, and is pushing Russia to the brink of exhaustion. A leader in such a position cannot help but consider the possibility of betrayal. U.S. and European intelligence agencies have reported at least 3 assassination attempts on Putin since Russia launched its military operation in Ukraine. One allegedly took place right in Moscow, when his motorcade was targeted by a roadside bomb. Putin narrowly escaped, but several of his bodyguards later disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Another attempt reportedly occurred as he was preparing to visit a military base near the Ukrainian border. An unidentified drone entered the airspace and was shot down less than 5 kilometers from his convoy. While the Kremlin has never publicly confirmed these reports, they coincide with periods when Putin vanished from the media for days. In this context, the fake Kremlin stages become understandable. The decoy offices aren't just for filming, they are tools to mislead the enemy. Whenever Putin appears on television, no one can be certain where he is. It could be a bunker in Siberia, a military base in the Urals, or even a command center in the Far East. This creates a thick fog of war around Russian power. But it also reveals a truth. Putin is ruling from the shadows, like a king afraid of the light. From Military 247. This is an extremely dangerous situation. A leader who doesn't appear in public creates a crisis of confidence throughout the entire chain of command. The generals serving under him can't be sure if they're receiving orders from the real Putin or from a figurehead manipulated by another power faction. This could lead to strategic blunders, making Russia even weaker against NATO and Ukraine. Remember, in war, the presence of the supreme commander is decisive. Winston Churchill personally inspected London during World War II to bolster public morale. In contrast, a leader who disappears will only sow doubt and fear within his own military. Let's ask the question, is Putin repeating Hitler's tragedy in his final days in Berlin? Hitler retreated to his bunker, no longer appearing in public and issuing disjointed orders disconnected from the reality of the battlefield. If Putin is truly hiding in the dark, is Russia today any different from Germany in 1945? But the truth is more complex. There's a theory that Putin fears not just the West, but also his own allies. Russia has had to rely heavily on North Korea and Iran for weapons and ammunition. In return, Moscow has been forced to make concessions and secret deals. Some experts believe these concessions may have angered factions within Russia. In that case, an assassination plot from a pro-Russian camp is not out of the question. And this is the point where the US and NATO are pressing their advantage. Donald Trump knows that a leader living in fear cannot make tough decisions. He is using this moment to strengthen trust with allies. A short message like, "Here we go," is enough to signal that the U.S. is ready. America continues to pump advanced weapons into Ukraine, from Patriot and HIMARS systems to MQ-9 Reaper drones, all of which are technologically superior to Russia's. This support isn't just aimed at the battlefield in Ukraine, it's aimed directly at the psyche of the Kremlin. If Putin is truly scared and in hiding, the message from Washington only makes him more insecure. There's an interesting detail. Many recent videos show Putin with a tense face, sometimes moving with difficulty. Some observers have questioned whether it's the real Putin or a body double used to maintain his image. The question might sound crazy, but in the world of conspiracy theories, it's not at all absurd. If the Kremlin is willing to set up fake offices, using a look-alike to sit in the president's chair isn't impossible. This leads to an even more chilling scenario. Perhaps Putin is no longer in the Kremlin at all, and what the world is seeing is just the product of a massive propaganda machine. In that case, power in Russia is no longer held by an individual, but by a group pulling the strings behind the scenes. A Russia manipulated by shadows would be a major threat to global security. But one thing is certain, when a leader lives in fear of assassination and has to hide in the shadows, it is a sign of weakness, and when Russia weakens, the United States and its allies have an even greater opportunity to solidify their position. Trump understands this perfectly. He doesn't need to make grand declarations. He just needs to keep supplying weapons, supporting allies, and waiting for the right moment. Ladies and gentlemen, when Putin is forced to live in constant fear, when the Kremlin puts on a fake show, and when the whole world is asking where he really is, we are seeing Russia fall into its deepest period of instability in decades. A leader obsessed with fear cannot lead a country out of crisis. And in the global power game, his absence is an opportunity for America to assert its dominance. You could say that Putin has vanished from the spotlight. He may still be alive, but his power is severely shaken. And in this world of calculation, when one leader disappears, another often emerges to take their place. The question is, who is that replacement? And will Russia still be the Russia we once knew on the international stage? There are moments when a single phrase, a brief action, is enough to change the entire game. For Donald Trump, that moment came when he posted just 3 words. Here we go. At first glance, it's just a vague statement, but in the context of a Russian drone crossing the border into Poland, a NATO member, those 3 words carry a completely different meaning. It's not just a warning. It's like a secret command activating the entire Western alliance. Why does such a short phrase carry so much weight? Simply because it comes from Donald Trump, the man who commands the most powerful military in the world. The U.S. currently possesses a global deterrent force, from 11 aircraft carrier strike groups and hundreds of F-35 stealth jets to a massive nuclear arsenal. When Trump speaks, NATO allies understand immediately that Washington is prepared for a more serious scenario. And most importantly, the Kremlin understands it too. Military analysts believe the "here we go" message was no accident. It came at the exact moment rumors of Putin's disappearance in the Kremlin's fake offices were swirling. This fuels the conspiracy theory that Trump knows Putin is no longer in full control. If he's really hiding in some bunker, then who is in charge in Russia now? A group of generals? A security council, or some shadow power manipulating things to keep the war going? When Trump says, "here we go," it could be a message to the very people now in charge instead of Putin. We know who you are, and we are ready to act. Poland, NATO's frontline state, reacted immediately and forcefully. The Polish prime minister and president made urgent calls to Washington. Just hours later, the Pentagon announced the deployment of additional Patriot air defense systems and reinforced its squadrons of F-15s and F-35s in Eastern Europe. Remember, Poland is not just a NATO member, it's a strategic springboard if the West wants to pressure Moscow. When a Russian drone crossed its border, it was a slap in the face to NATO's credibility. Trump understood that if the U.S. didn't respond strongly enough, the entire alliance would be shaken. Therefore, "here we go" was his way of reassuring allies. America will not stand by and watch. Remarkably, 26 NATO countries simultaneously declared that Russia must pay a price. This is a rare response in history where the entire bloc acted as one. What made them agree so quickly? Experts believe Trump's brief signal acted as a lever, lifting the entire NATO alliance into a state of unity. In politics, a single phrase can sometimes be more valuable than a dozen meetings. Trump used this to turn Russia's provocation into an opportunity to tighten the alliance even further. Look at the information strategy. Putin disappears and the Kremlin releases fake images, creating ambiguity. Meanwhile, Trump also uses ambiguity, but it's a calculated ambiguity. Here we go. One side hides the truth, the other sows uncertainty. Who will win this psychological war? For NATO, Putin's ambiguity is a sign of weakness. Trump's ambiguity, however, is a sign of strength, because it keeps Moscow guessing. Meanwhile, Western intelligence has recorded at least 12 incidents of Russian drones entering Poland. Some crashed near Warsaw's military bases. Fortunately, they weren't carrying explosives, but they were enough to ignite outrage. Poland immediately requested an emergency NATO meeting. The Prime Minister declared, "Either we stand united against Russia or we accept the risk of the war spreading." This is the tipping point where a small action could erupt into a full-scale conflict. And Trump, with his 3 words, has pushed Putin, or rather the people behind Putin, onto the back foot. The conspiracy theory is that the U.S. already knew this would happen. The CIA, along with its network of satellites and reconnaissance drones, has been closely monitoring every move from Moscow. Russia's drone flights over Poland weren't just a provocation. They may have been a test of NATO's response. But what Russia didn't expect was that Putin's disappearance would make this test backfire. Instead of dividing the West, it united NATO more than ever. Trump seized the opportunity to turn an incident into a reason to strengthen the alliance. Here, the role of American weapons is undeniable. Poland, Germany, Romania, and many Eastern European countries have been equipped by the U.S. with dozens of Patriot and HIMARS systems, with F-35s on the way. Every time Russia sends a drone across the border, these systems are put to the test, and the results show that American technology is far superior to the old Soviet equipment Russia is still using. This sends a dual message. To its allies, the U.S. proves it is a reliable protector. To Russia, the U.S. affirms that any incursion will come at a high price. Let's analyze the psychological warfare. Putin disappears, and the Kremlin creates fake stages. Meanwhile, Trump appears strong, delivering a short but shocking message. In terms of image, it's a stark contrast. On one side, a weak, evasive, and fearful Russian leader. On the other, a confident and decisive American leader whose 3 words can shake the globe. In a war fought not just with weapons, but with leaders' credibility, Trump clearly has the upper hand. And it's not just NATO. The European Union has also joined the game. The European Commission called for tougher sanctions and more aid for Ukraine, calling Russia's actions the most dangerous escalation since the war began. Germany, the UK, and France all issued warnings to Moscow. This is the domino effect Trump wanted. He doesn't need to intervene directly, he just needs to send signals, and all of Europe will automatically close ranks. This has turned "here we go" into an incredibly effective diplomatic tool. Conspiracy theorists go even further. Some analysts believe Trump chose this moment because he realized Putin no longer has full control of the military. When the supreme leader vanishes, the Russian army becomes a machine operating without a clear objective. This is the perfect opportunity for the U.S. to launch a psychological blow, forcing Moscow into a passive defensive position. You could say Trump is not just warning Russia, but sending a message to the world. America is ready to lead, and no one is allowed to cross NATO's red line. Another important detail, in a call with the Polish president, Trump stressed that any violation of NATO territory would receive an immediate response. While the language was diplomatic combined with "here we go," It sounds like a firm commitment. If Russia continues its provocations, the U.S. will respond with military force. This raises the question of whether the U.S. is ready for a direct attack on Russia. From a military standpoint, it's not out of the question. NATO has deployed hundreds of thousands of troops in Eastern Europe, along with thousands of Leopard and Abrams tanks and a powerful air force. With one command from Washington, this entire system could be activated instantly. In contrast, Russia has to spread its forces on the Ukrainian front, its ammunition stockpiles are dwindling, and its economy is crippled by sanctions. Meanwhile, the U.S. and NATO are on the offensive, ready to deliver a decisive blow. Here we go. In this context, the phrase is more than a warning. It's the opening line of a new chapter in the conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, on the global chessboard of power, sometimes one small move is enough to knock your opponent out of the game. Putin disappeared, and the Kremlin put on a fake play. At that exact moment, Donald Trump emerged with a short but meaningful phrase. It was the lever that unified NATO, tightened the European alliance, and made Russia tremble in the shadows. The day Putin is removed from the game may not come from an assassination, but from his own fear and mysterious disappearance. And Donald Trump, with his military strength and political artistry, has turned that fear into an opportunity for the West. So the question is, if Trump has given NATO the go-ahead, what's the next step? Is the U.S. ready to take the war beyond Ukraine, straight to the heart of Russian power? And if so, will the world witness a confrontation not seen since the Cold War? Ladies and gentlemen, a supreme leader who used to appear on television almost weekly has now mysteriously vanished. The Kremlin is only releasing staged photos, fake offices, and unverified video clips. The biggest question the world is asking is, why did Putin disappear? What is the real reason hidden behind the curtain of power in Moscow? The first and most common theory is his declining health. For years, rumors about Putin's health have been circulating. Some sources say he has thyroid cancer. Others claim he has undergone secret surgeries. There are even reports from Western intelligence that Putin requires regular treatments just to be able to appear in public. If this is true, the fake offices are simply a way to hide the fact that Russia has a president who is no longer fit to command the country. But health is only part of the story. If it were merely an illness, why would the Kremlin stage such a large-scale deception? The second theory is assassination plots. In recent years, Russia has been caught in a spiral of instability. The war in Ukraine has not gone according to Moscow's script. The Wagner Group once mutinied, marching on Moscow in a matter of hours, showing that the security apparatus is not entirely loyal. In that context, Putin has every reason to believe he could be targeted by the domestic opposition, by oligarchs who have lost fortunes to sanctions, or even by his own military generals. A roadside bomb, a drone attacking his motorcade, or a secret poisoning, all are plausible scenarios. Therefore, Putin's disappearance from public view could be a way to avoid a tragic end like Gaddafi in Libya or Saddam Hussein in Iraq. But it's the third theory that truly startles analysts, a covert coup. We must remember that Russia is not a multi-party democracy like in the West. Power in Russia is not held by one man, but by a complex network involving the FSB, the military, and the oligarchs. If one day Putin becomes a liability, it's entirely possible that his own inner circle forced him to step back. In this scenario, Putin's image on television is merely a tool to maintain temporary stability. In reality, major decisions are being made by a secret council of power. And if that's true, then today's Russia is no longer Putin's Russia. It has become the Russia of faceless figures. One detail makes this theory even more compelling. In many recent meetings, Putin has appeared with unusual mannerisms. Sometimes he sits motionless, just reading from a script. Other times his face is stiff, his speech slow, lacking its former sharpness. Some observers believe it's not the real Putin, but a body double, or at least a carefully coached stand-in. It sounds outlandish, but in the world of politics, using doubles is not unprecedented. Saddam Hussein reportedly used dozens of them. So why couldn't the Kremlin do the same to maintain the illusion of Putin's presence? The fourth theory is psychological strategy. It's possible Putin and his apparatus want to create deliberate ambiguity by disappearing. He makes the entire world ask, where is Putin? This uncertainty could be used by the Kremlin as a tool to confuse NATO, making it impossible to predict Russia's next move. If this is the case, Putin's disappearance is not a sign of weakness, but a weapon of psychological warfare. However, to execute this strategy, Russia would need a machine strong enough to control both domestic and international opinion. In the current climate, it's doubtful the Kremlin can sustain this game for long. All these theories lead to one conclusion. Russia is entering a period of serious power instability. A vanished leader, a government staging fake plays, it's an image unseen in the 21st century. This has major implications for international security. First, if Putin is truly gone, who controls Russia's nuclear button? Russia possesses over 6,000 nuclear warheads, the largest arsenal in the world. If a shadow group seizes control, the consequences would be unimaginable. Second, this disappearance could weaken Russia's position in negotiations. When it's unclear who is in charge, the West can use it to apply even greater pressure. Donald Trump has shown he is ready to seize this opportunity by using "here we go" to rally NATO. Third, this instability could prolong the war in Ukraine. A non-transparent Kremlin might make extreme decisions to prove it's still in control, which would only make the conflict more dangerous. From the U.S. perspective, this is a golden opportunity. Washington is not only continuing to send weapons to Ukraine, but is also ramping up sanctions to cripple the Russian economy. 2 million artillery shells from Europe and tens of billions of dollars in military aid are turning Ukraine into a battlefield that is bleeding Russia dry. Meanwhile, the U.S. maintains its overwhelming technological advantage. Weapon systems like the F-35, B-2, and Tomahawk missiles allow Washington to deter any adversary. And Donald Trump, with his decisiveness and influence, has turned the fears surrounding Putin's disappearance into a strategic tool. It's also worth noting that the Russian people themselves are confused. The propaganda videos aren't convincing enough. Many are questioning whether their president is still alive or just a shadow on a screen. A government that loses the trust of its own people cannot last long. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is the real reason for Putin's disappearance? It could be failing health, assassination plots, a covert coup, or a sophisticated psychological strategy. But whatever the reason, his disappearance has created the largest power vacuum in modern Russian history. That vacuum is being fully exploited by the U.S. and NATO. That vacuum is making the West more determined to lead Ukraine to victory. And that vacuum is making the whole world wonder, is Russia today still Putin's Russia, or just the shadow of a slowly collapsing empire? For Donald Trump, everything is clear. He knows the U.S. holds the absolute advantage in military technology, international alliances, and strategic initiative. Trump doesn't need many words. One short phrase is enough to tilt the world in America's favor. Meanwhile, Putin, who once prided himself on being Russia's strongest man, now has to hide in the shadows, appearing only through fake offices. This isn't just the disappearance of a man, it's the disappearance of an entire image of power. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps one day the truth will come out. Then we will know where Putin is, how he is living, and who is really running Russia. But until then, the world will continue to live with conspiracy theories, doubts, and anxiety. Because a nuclear superpower whose supreme leader has vanished is a recipe for unprecedented turmoil. And as we've analyzed, when Putin disappears, the biggest winners are the U.S. and its NATO allies. One final question for you to ponder. When a leader rules by fear and fake images, does he still truly hold power? Or has Russia already fallen into the hands of faceless figures, while the world still thinks Putin is in charge? Thank you for watching our analysis of the war's developments. If you're passionate about geopolitics, military power, and what's really happening behind the scenes on the global stage, then this is the place for you. Don't forget to follow our channel.